RotoGrinders Today. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. BlenderHD, BlenderHD. You want to follow me on Twitter? And it's Wednesday, June 12th. We'll be taking a look at tonight's 8-game MLB slate on the docket on DraftKings, I guess as well as FanDuel. And hit that thumbs up button on your way in the door. Hit that subscribe button if you're new here. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. We got a big day here at RotoGrinders. Right after us at 12:30 Eastern, there'll be a crunch time with Roth and TJ and Squirrel Patrol. They'll be talking about the 4-game afternoon slate. They'll be taking you up to lock then. And then later today, 5 o'clock Eastern, Grinders Live, 6:20 crunch time to get all your weather updates from Roth. I don't think we may have to worry about one game maybe tonight. Philadelphia at Boston, possibly, but he'll update you later today. Who also will be on later today. This is kind of like a barbell day for him. They're getting up really early and then also doing a show really late. It's Taylor Smith, Tay Bojangles on Twitter. Thank you for gracing us with your presence, even though it's 8 a.m. where you are.
Yeah. Luckily, I'm an early bird, so happy to be here.
Okay. So how long have you been up? Are you someone like James? James gets up at 5:30 in the morning. And it's like,
I was going to say, yeah.
I'm only asleep for 3 hours at that point.
Yeah, 5:30 usually. Everyone else is on the East Coast. So I got to kind of get up and align my schedule accordingly. But yeah, I'm glad we don't have to talk about the early slate because it's a 4-gamer with every game starting an hour after each other. So it's going to be a mess. And main slate looks a little more inviting today.
Yeah, the main slate. What I like about the main slate is that we got some pitching options that I don't mind. We got some hitting options that I don't mind. But I don't. It's not like your prototypical Coors slate or the Spencer Strider slate, where it's everyone knows who to play, one pitcher, everyone knows what stack is everything, and then it's just if the chalk doesn't go off, feel free to find a low owned option elsewhere. I think it's a bit spread out. One highlight of this season we've seen with pitchers that are at least healthy is that there really aren't that many ace pitchers anymore, and the pricing is kind of reflecting that going into a slate and finding I'm going to pay $9K, $10K for 2 pitchers both on DraftKings is less of a thing, and that kind of opens us up to the stack prices on some of the good teams aren't nearly as prohibitive as they used to be because you could get away with some of these cheaper pitchers. But on the high end, I know we always on the show do things in buckets, the 3 buckets for pitchers. We got 16 pitchers on the slate. I think we could eliminate a couple of these guys. But in the first bucket, would it be, it's the White Sox. It's Bryce Miller. Yeah. He's $9K. Sonny Gray is $10K against the Pirates. Is he worth $10K? I guess. And then you got guys like Walker Buehler against Texas, who raw talent is there, but I'm not necessarily sure if he's the same, he's not a 10 strikeout pitcher really anymore. You got Pivetta, who I think has probably the best strikeout upside, but it's facing Philadelphia, so that's not a very good matchup at all.
No.
Are any of these? Christian Sanchez against Boston, I don't mind at 8K. Who would be a candidate for the first? Is Bryce Miller the only surefire first bucket pitcher that if you were building a single entry lineup, one lineup, something like that, and you're I only have to choose one pitcher and then anyone else, would the number one on your list be Bryce Miller?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of value and obviously the matchup as good as it gets. The Sox are pathetic, and we've been playing these Mariner pitchers against them the past couple of days. I did the Jonathan Diaz thing last night, which was not a able experience, but at least he was 4K flat. Gray, Pirates are a team you want to pick on, but Gray's not necessarily a 10K guy to begin with. The strikeouts are up this season. Don't fully hit. He's fine. I would certainly prioritize Miller for 1,000 less than him. And otherwise, I'd probably pay further down for SP2. Pairing Gray and Miller is viable, but I think the price alone would put Gray into the B bucket for me. And Miller is, unless it's going to be like overwhelmingly chalky, like if his ownership gets up to 50%, which I don't think will happen because there are enough options to kind of spread things out. Miller just looks like the guy, and I think it's kind of clear on this slate.
But I do think there's a lot of B bucket pitchers, or at least B and C bucket pitchers. I really think on this slate that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There may be like 10 pitchers that if you told me that you were playing, depending on the lineup that you were playing, I don't think you're like nuts to play at all. So the other ones I mentioned were like Walker Buehler at 8,300 against Texas, Christian Sanchez at 8K against Boston. I would have to assume Sanchez has to go in the second bucket for sure. Buehler, I would feel like comfortable with, but I almost feel as if like, I guess he's a B bucket. I mean, I guess I'm like I almost feel like I'd rather play Nick Pivetta as a GPP player than play Walker Buehler, even though Nick Pivetta is 9,300. Only because, from a strikeout perspective, like to me, the two most interesting pitchers on the slate that I would put in the B bucket, even though people would be like risky B, but the upside may be worth it, is Nick Pivetta and Tanner Bybee, because they're in bad matchups, or like Tanner Bybee's not in a bad matchup. It's just that when you're playing in Cincinnati, if you're giving up some fly balls, they may turn into home runs.
Yeah.
But the key point is that the strikeouts are there. So at lower ownership, I mean, I think both these guys come in and around maybe 10-ish, 12-ish% ownership. That I'd almost rather play them over a Sonny Gray at double the ownership, or Christian Sanchez at double the ownership, assuming that I have like Bryce Miller in my lineup, right? Like if I don't have Bryce Miller, then I feel like you can make kind of any combination you want. I don't know. What are your thoughts on like these guys like Bybee, Buehler, Pivetta?
I think Bybee is the most interesting, even if he is the most, I guess he's not more expensive than Pivetta, but if I can avoid picking on the Phillies at Fenway, I would prefer to do that. Cincinnati not as imposing. A few more strikeouts in there too than Philadelphia has. That is the better pitcher, I think. But if, I guess it kind of depends on ownership. Like if Bybee is going to be twice as owned as Pivetta, I can certainly see the case for finding the 500 more to get to Pivetta. Buehler, not really going to be on my radar, it looks like. He's not expensive, but Texas isn't really the easiest matchup. He hasn't looked very good off the IL to begin with. I guess if Seager's in there, it's a little less imposing. He's been out the last week or so, but I think there are enough other options to where Buehler kind of falls down the list. I'd probably put him in the C bucket. Yeah, Bybee would be B bucket, no doubt. Sanchez is the one I'd have the most interest in, though. He is the cheapest of that group. Boston is extremely high strikeout against lefties. The projected lineup is like just under 30% this season. Sanchez isn't a great strikeout pitcher, but he does keep the ball on the ground, and Boston has been hitting the ball on the ground a lot against lefties. Projected lineup about 45% ground balls against lefties. So if anyone's going to kind of get through some easy innings and get to 5 or 6 innings with 4 to 5 strikeouts and minimum damage allowed, I think it would be Sanchez. So I think you can make a case that he would be A bucket based on salary, but I think there is a guy that's cheaper that has a better case for the A bucket, even though it's not pretty.
Is that unprettiness facing the Marlins?
He is indeed.
David Peterson is 6,300. He's mostly stretched out. I mean, like he can pitch. I mean, is he going to pitch 100 pitches? No, probably not. But I don't think he'll be taken out after 65. being at Citi Field as a lefty against the Marlins, sure, give it to me. 6,300 seems like an easy click. Seems like the easy clicks on this slate are like Miller and Peterson. And then you have plenty of money to. I mean, we're going to talk about stacks that have 6K guys in it that you're going to easily be able to get.
Mm-hmm.
Is because of price. So we also have the other side of the game. Braxton Garrett at 7,100. The Mets aren't a bad matchup in Citi Field, so like that's viable. We have any pitcher against the Mariners has strikeout upside, so Cannon's there, but I'm not necessarily sure. Like he's 6K, but David Peterson's a better pitcher, and Cannon, maybe he only goes 4 innings or something. Like it's not like he's going to be a 7-inning pitcher. So are you making the case that Peterson, even as what Cheese would say is cheap nonsense, that Peterson should be an A-bucket pitcher?
I think so, just because 6'3" is so cheap, and matchup really couldn't be better. Good pitcher's park. Like you said, there are a lot of stacks you want to pay up for tonight. The Yankees are on the slate. The Dodgers are on the slate. The Royals are also somewhat expensive, I suppose. It's just easy to get to him. Even if he gets through, it's like who was the guy last night for the Twins? Varland. It's kind of the same thing. Like you're just hoping that he crawls his way across a certain fantasy point threshold at a super cheap salary. I expect Peterson to be quite chalky, which would be, I guess, an argument against him, and maybe a case for the Marlins being upgraded as a potential stack, but we'll get to that at some point. Yeah, as of now, I can see Miller.
Is Peterson worth so if, let's say, for instance, Peterson ends up as like 30% owned, Garrett is like 10% owned, and Cannon is virtually unowned, like maybe 3% owned. How much better is Peterson over Garrett over Cannon? Like, does the ownership reflect that difference? Or even an even better standpoint, since I always say lineups, not players. Do you really want to be playing a Miller Peterson lineup? Would you rather play a Miller Garrett, Miller Cannon lineup that looks the same? Essentially, your Miller Peterson lineups with the Yankees or with the Royals or with the Dodgers or something like is going to look the same. It's just that you have this not Peterson, you have Garrett or Cannon there, right? Or maybe Sanchez will be owned enough. Would you rather do that, or would you rather go, I'll play Miller and Peterson, but then I'm going to play the Cardinals or the Diamondbacks, and not take like one of the higher team total teams? Which one would you rather do today?
I would probably shy away from pairing Miller and Peterson in that scenario. I think you can stack the Yankees, like you said, with Garrett instead. He's not that much more expensive, and he's arguably a better pitcher in real life than David Peterson. The Mets aren't a great offense. They do have decent numbers against lefties this season, but Garrett has some strikeout stuff to his game. If I'm playing Miller and Peterson, I'm more likely to do like the Angels or the Royals, something like that. That's a little more off the board, even in a single entry. Like it's perfectly fine to play Miller and Peterson and just hope that your chalky stack you play with them, the Yankees or someone, gets there, and you happen to be different enough somehow in a single entry, smaller field thing. But large field stuff, that is probably going to be a pretty popular combo. I am curious about Gray though, because he's been good all season. The strikeouts have been higher than ever. What was his ownership coming in at? Let's see.
I mean, that has him at close to 30. I figure he'll be somewhere. He'll be like 25 to 30, I think, on this slate. Well, I mean, the question Taylor here maybe isn't having to do with pairing it with stacks. Which one would you rather have in your lineup, Miller or Peterson? Because I mean, there are other. It's not like that I mean, look at all the pitchers we've already talked about that at least have a case to be made. Some may be more risky than others. Would you rather play a lineup of like Tanner Bybee and Peterson, right? Because you're paying, just $200 less than Miller for Bybee, riskier situation, or would you rather play Miller as the higher price pitcher and then play Garrett? So really, to me, like, you don't necessarily, you could do one of the two and then you could still play the Yankees. I mean, like, you're still not playing the chalkiest pitcher combination. So it allows you to at least play a good stack. And then you also have Sanchez there. I mean, it almost seems like there may be enough combinations of pitcher that I'm fine with playing, that a Miller Peterson isn't necessary. I mean, you could play neither of them. You could play Bybee and Sanchez. And I'm like, am I afraid of Bryce Miller? I don't think so. I don't think I should be. Am I afraid of David Peterson? Yeah, they're probably better point per dollar wise, but Bybee, Sanchez could be perfectly fine. And then it's like, okay, then I could still play the Yankees. I mean, like, it feels like the slate, there are clear hitters. Like, it seems like there's like maybe 3 or 4 spots that's really where I want to go for hitters. And pitchers, I don't know. We already mentioned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We mentioned 9 pitchers, and I'm pretty comfortable with almost any 2 combination of those 9 pitchers.
Yeah, there are enough combos to where, I don't know, like Miller Peterson makes the most sense to me, but with Gray coming in at 30%, maybe it's not overwhelming chalk. Peterson Gray is something that people will do, I assume. Also, Cannon's viable just because he's essentially the same price as Peterson, going to be way less owned. The Mariners have been a team that we've picked on all season. I guess the issue with Cannon is he's not good. And there's no telling how long he's going to pitch. Like, he threw 60 pitches in his last game, which was 5 days ago. Maybe he gets 80 at the most, but that's probably a stretch even. So you're probably talking about 5 innings, maybe at the max for that guy, if everything goes perfectly for him. Peterson, I think, has more wiggle room just because he's been around and typically has a longer leash. So the ownership's justified with him. He projects really well in the bat. Matchup is obviously one of the better ones on the slate, but Cannon's in the player pool, kind of just an ownership thing and salary thing. And you can make a similar case for Garrett, even if it's not the best spot. I do think there are enough options. Like, there's 7 guys right there at the top that you can mix and match. So yeah, they can't all be overwhelmingly owned. So you're going to get some unique combinations in there somewhere.
Okay. So to run it down overall, so A bucket, Miller Peterson. B bucket, Sanchez, Gray, Bybee.
Yeah, I can make a case for Garrett in there at the fringe, but yeah,
the B bucket. Okay, I'm fine with that. And then the C bucket would be like Pivetta, Bueller,
Lodolo.
Cannon.
Lodolo is just good. So
we haven't talked about Lodolo. I mean, I guess he has to make the 3rd bucket. I mean, out of the pitch, I mean, I probably don't play Pivetta. I'm playing like 3 lineups. So I mean, I'm much more into Tanner Bybee than Nick Pivetta today. So like, I'm just making the executive decision to just play Bybee, so I don't need to play Pivetta. So
yeah,
like, if I'm not going to play Pivetta, like, I'm probably not going to play Lodolo against the Guardians, because I don't know. I don't know if it's just bias. The Guardians, it's just hard to get ceilings against. I mean, it's just like this. Like, you could have a nice pitching performance against the Guardians and have like 6 innings, 2 hits, 4 strikeouts, and it's like, okay, that's nice. Then and you may not even get the win. I mean, like, you get 16 fantasy points, and it's just like,
not going to cut it for 9.6,
right? But 9,600, it's like, I don't want to pay up for a pitcher against the Guardians when they really don't have as many strikeouts as you think in their lineup. But I don't think it's crazy. If you want to throw him, if you were playing 150 lineups, I think you throw in Lodolo in the 3rd bucket. But is there anyone else? I mean, we the only pitchers we haven't mentioned are Slade Ciccone, Soriano, John Gray, Bolly Falter, and Cody Pote. Is there a case to be made for any of these pitchers?
If anyone, it would be maybe Soriano, just because he has some strikeout stuff, and Arizona hasn't been quite as potent this season. But he's not like a punt salary. He's 7,500 on DK, so probably more of a fringe 150 thing, like borderline C bucket. But I would put Lodolo ahead of him and everyone else that we've talked about. Slade Ciccone, I'm more inclined to play the Angels than to play him, just because he's awful. But he is another cheap guy, and the Angels aren't a good offense to begin with either. So I guess you could make a case for him, but
You got
that's
so
like
many other better
borderline.
cheap guys. It's just
Yeah,
it's not like if this was the type of slate where you're just knocked out like Peterson and Garrett and Cannon and then it's just like, okay, well, in order to get a full Dodgers stack, you need to play Slade Ciccone. It's like, okay, at least you made a case for me, but it's like, well, David Peterson's going to be 25% owned. Braxton Garrett's going to be 10% owned. Jonathan Cannon is going to be 5% owned. And well, Ciccone's going to be 1% owned. It's like, well, probably should be 1% owned. That's probably correct.
Yeah, you're probably stretching it there. Obviously, Daniel Lynch is cheap, but he's facing the Yankees. So unless you're interested in getting all the leverage in the world with a $5,500 gas can, probably don't need to.
What happened to that guy? That guy, when he
played
came
him
in,
before, that's for sure. Yeah,
decent, and now he's the worst of both worlds. He gives he gives up 5 balls and he doesn't strike out anyone.
Yeah, wide split lefty facing the Yankees is in a hot weather game with wind blowing out. It's gonna be fun.
Right. The only way to make it worse is if they were playing in Yankee Stadium.
Yeah. Well, it should be fun. They're going to be pretty chalky, I would think, which might make the case for them to not be a bucket, but we'll see.
Okay, let's get to the stacks then. I'm going to go down based on the bat point per dollar projections, which you could get if you're a bat subscriber. You get all the RotoGrinders projections, all our ownership, all the tools, Sim Labs, Lineup HQ, Cheese's $1 Million Musings, all the consensus value rankings, all of our premium stuff. We got Plate IQ. We got so much stuff here to utilize for DFS as well as betting and pick'em purposes. So go click on that link in the description. We're running a special right now. 6 months of RotoGrinders Premium for all the sports. You get all in one combo premium, $250 off for 6 months. Or if you want to try us out for a month, we'll knock $40 off the price. Number one raw point stack on the slate, according to the bat, the Yankees, we mentioned, against an opener and then Daniel Lynch. The only case that you convinced me that they're going to be lower than, are they going to be lower than 15% owned? Because if they're going to be lower than 15% owned, I'm still okay putting them in the A tier.
I don't know. It's tough because it's not a full like 12 or 13 game slate. It seems like a pretty obvious spot, especially when you factor in the weather. Lynch just got his face pumped last time he pitched. Everyone remembers, presumably. I could see them being fairly chalky, but
like if you take a look at their lineup, so like the thing is that when you make a 5-man stack, you're going to be playing people at the bottom of the order, and they're an away team, so I'm much more fine with that. The likely stack combination, if you want to, and the thing, because it's like all outfielders. So like from a meta standpoint on the slate, if you're going to get different on this slate, outfielder may actually be the spot to play good players that will be much lower owned than should be on this slate, because if you're stacking the Yankees, a lot of stacks will have 3 outfield spots in their lineup. And if the Yankees fail, and let's say only one of them actually does well, like the whole stack kind of gets ruined. I try to avoid situations like that. So like against Daniel Lynch, I almost feel like I want to play Volpe, Soto, Judge, Stanton, Torres. Given that, and I don't even mind Austin Wells just to fill a catcher spot, because I don't think there's like a catcher that you have to play today or anything like that. Anthony Rizzo is just, I don't know, is dead now. I guess.
Yeah.
I don't. But obviously against Daniel Lynch, I want I mean, I want the I mean, come on, like Stanton and Judge, like they seem like no-brainer type of plays to put in your stack. I mean, it seems I'm looking at these Yankees line. Maybe we have to bump this down to a B tier because I even think that the best stack, like it's an A tier if you play a lineup that like if you don't play Judge or Stanton in your stack, or you're playing Rizzo and Wells in your stack instead. But if you're gonna play like the common Volpe, Torres, Judge, Stanton, Soto, like that, to me that may be over the 15% threshold. But I think there are ways that you can play the Yankees that'll be underneath. So can we concede? So it really depends on how important is it to you, Taylor, that if you play the Yankee stack, that you just play the best Yankee stack, like the best projected players.
Yeah, it's obviously alluring and looks really good on paper. I do wonder about things like Soto. I mean, Altavilla is apparently the opener. He's a right-hander. So Soto will presumably face him, and then the lefty after that. I don't know if people are going to really factor that in too much, and if he comes in a lot lower owned than Stanton or Judge, then maybe he's someone you'd also want to throw in there. But yeah, it's really tempting. I would put him in B tier just because ownership. Like this could be a slate where someone like LeMahieu is 15% owned in the 9-hole, which is
just for no reason, like just like
yeah,
people's 5-man stacks, just like okay, cheap guy, put him in and
yeah,
whatever.
So if someone like that's going over owned, then the whole stack's going to be super popular. So I would say B just because of ownership alone.
On the other side of the game, the Royals have almost a 5-team total against Cody Poteet. I mean, this is like the offensive game of the night. I think the Royals are going to be less owned than the Yankees. And as far as stacking them, I mean, they're kind of straightforward also because you kind of a lot of times avoid the bottom of their order. So playing Bobby Witt, Pasquantino, Perez, Melendez, Velasquez. I mean, and can you mix in a Waters? You can play Lofton at second base, I guess, a cheap second baseman. They don't project nearly as well as the Yankees because obviously they have a 1-run less total. But 4.73 implied total for the Royals is fairly healthy for this slate. They're playing in the same hot, wind blowing out environment as the Yankees. I mean, because of ownership, I mean, are the Royals an A-tier team now?
I think they're an easy A. I think they're the easiest A team on the slate. Based on projection, based on total, the matchup's not scary. Poteet is like, I don't really know who that is. Minor league guy filling a spot for the Yankees right now. There's a lot, like it's a good combination of Witt being expensive, Perez, Garcia, pricey, and then at the bottom, Waters, Lofton, and Isbell are all 3-2 or less. Melendez as well. So it's easy to stack them. They're not going to cause you. You don't have to go like Peterson, Cannon to stack the Royals. You can stack them with decent pitching. Like you said, the weather's probably the best on the slate. So ownership considered, Kansas City is an A for me.
Well, the next on the list from a raw projection standpoint is maybe the most expensive stack on the slate. This is a stack that you're going to need a David Peterson. You may not even be able to play like Miller Peterson if you really want to play like if you want to play Dodgers Yankees. There's your Peterson Cannon lineups right there.
Yep.
And that's the Dodgers against John Gray. I get the sense that more people are going to want to play like a Gray or a Miller. Have a more don't want to double kind of even like you could get away playing the Dodgers with like Sanchez Peterson. I think maybe we'll see more lineups that kind of maybe look like that. Unless you're going to do like a 3-man, like a really cheap 3, like if you do like bottom of the order Royals 3-man, then you could play Sonny Gray and get like, you know, the Dodgers in. I don't know. I kind of want to put the Dodgers in the A tier because I just think at their prices, they're going to be significantly low. Our projections will say that they're owned under, but close enough to the Yankees. But I think just from a human, perspective, you run like lineup HQ, you're not getting the Dodgers at their prices. And the Dodgers on any day could put up, I mean, against John Gray, they could put up 12 runs, no problem. And I don't mind the cheap, and truthfully, I don't mind the cheap pitching on the slate. That, I don't know. Do you agree with me? Or they're at least a B tier team. I'm making the case that they should be an A tier team.
I think you can make a case for A just based on talent and ownership. The spot's perfectly fine. This could be a slate where it's like Ohtani is 15 to 20% owned, and then everyone else is under 10. Just people aren't going to be stacking them if they have money to spend. They're going to go up to the Yankees, it seems. So salary might put them into B just because it is hard to get to them without doing something gross like the Pirates or the Marlins, someone with them. But I think you've sold me on A. I'm fine with A for that just because they are they're just as good as the Yankees, and they're going to be owned at a fraction of what the Yankees will be. So I think it makes sense.
Okay. Then we got two teams that similar in projection. We have the Diamondbacks against Jose Soriano. And then we have the Phillies against Nick Pivetta. I'm not in the business of picking on Nick Pivetta. I think the Phillies are, remember, we do tiers, we adjust for ownership, but we're also talking about stacks. Like on DraftKings, you're stacking 5 batters from a team. I don't mind playing like a 1-0 from the Phillies against Pivetta. I don't even mind if you tell me that you're going to play a 3-man stack with the Phillies against Pivetta. I don't even think you're crazy on that. 5 against Pivetta. I don't know. I mean, raw talent, you can make a case for C, but I almost feel like from a stack perspective only. From a 1-0 perspective, you could possibly put them in the C or the B, but from a stack perspective, it's not like they're going to really be that owned. But do I really want to pay those prices for the Phillies when look at the teams above them. Look at the Dodgers, the Royals, the Yankees. We'll talk about some other teams. And if I'm going to play the Phillies against Pivetta, I mean, I'd rather just play a cheaper team against a worse pitcher.
Yeah, I think D is about right. I guess you could make a case for C just because they are pretty good and it is a good ballpark for offense. So if you want to play that angle, it's fine. They're not going to be popular either, which kind of leads me closer to C than to D, but the salaries are a thing to consider as well. So they're borderline. I would put Arizona in B, I think.
Do we lose more money with the Taylor, or do we lose more money with the Diamondbacks? The Diamondbacks are part of my pantheon of teams where they project well, they're low owned, and then you just sit there and you go, what is going on? And they don't even win. See, the thing about the Padres is when you play the Padres or the Braves, when they're low owned and project well, they at least go out and win 4-1. So, like, at least like from a real life perspective, I can't blame them because they did win the game. It's just that 4 runs ain't enough for my stack. So it's like they're gutless on that end. The Diamondbacks just go out and like project well and lose 12-3. So I'm with you. I put the Diamondbacks in the B tier, but I put the little asterisk above of a Ponzi scheme possible. There's a possible Ponzi scheme going on with the Diamondbacks, where you're going to be playing them for months until you get your money back.
I remember last year I was relieved whenever the Braves weren't on a slate because I would not really get to them, and they would hit 5 home runs every night. And this year I'm relieved that they're not on the slate because I play them because they're not owned and they don't do anything on any slate ever. So I can see that the similar case being made with Arizona. The Corbin Carroll thing, like he might be playing hurt and he's just been really bad, and projections can't really account for that. But at least he's not 5-5 anymore. He's only 4-5, so you're not really paying top dollar for him these days. It's a deep pitching slate. Soriano, like I said, is kind of a fringe, like 150 max kind of play. You're not really getting leverage with Arizona as a result, which might move them down to C. But as of now, I think they're a B for me. Just a combination of good park, decent enough matchup, fine value in the lineup. And it's not a really great slate for offense once you get past the Yankees and the Royals at the top.
Right. I mean, really, the teams that we have on the board right now are like, that's like the top half of the hitting.
Yeah.
And now there's just a gap, and there's going to be like a lot of teams here. And then maybe on the bottom, there's like 2 or 3 that are like they're really low projected. So from a point per dollar perspective, according to the bat projections in this like bucket of like mid-range teams, that these teams are playable, and some more so due to price than necessarily team total, but not bad. The Cardinals have a 4.7, like 4.75 team total against Bailey Falter. I think they're going to be like the chalky combination, like maybe not the 5-man, but I think that like Yankees plus Cardinals plus Miller plus Peterson is going to be like, that's going to be the most owned like construction. But it's hard to ignore. I mean, if we take a look, at the Cardinals, I mean, dude, like Nolan Gorman is 4,300, and he's the most expensive guy as a lefty on the lineup, and it's a non-strikeout throwing, soft tossing lefty against Goldschmidt and Arenado, who may not be as great as they used to be. Yankee stacks, right? Especially Yankee stacks aren't going to have a third baseman or a first base. Like, this is where it's like you're going to play Judge, you can play all the outfielders, you're going to play Torres, and then you're going to plug in Goldschmidt and Arenado and Ivan Herrera or something like that, and Miller and Peterson, and there you go. There's your highest projected 5-3 type of lineup. The Cardinals, I mean, there are other cheaper things here. Bolter's not going to be owned, so you're not going to get leverage. My natural instinct is but I mean, if this was a slate where people weren't playing cheap stacks, I would put them in the A tier. And if this was a slate where people weren't even playing cheap pieces, I'd put them in the B tier. But I almost feel like the Cardinals may be like absurdly over-owned for their ceiling projection. Right. That like I'm putting them on the C tier just for that, because really we're going to talk about like 5 more teams that project just like the Cardinals. And the only reason why the Cardinals would be above them is just because they're just 20% cheaper than the other teams. And I don't think they're going to be 20%. I don't think the ownership gap is going to be like that. I think it's going to be a lot of Cardinals and then big gap. And people aren't going to be playing a lot of these other teams. Are you down with the C tier for the Cardinals?
Yeah, I would hear a case for D also, just based on ownership. That's not an amazing spot. Like, Falter is one of the worst pitchers on the slate, but it's not like the Cardinals' home stadium is Fenway or Coors or Great American or something like that. Mason Wynn is another guy that'll probably be pretty owned, like as a Volpe alternative. He's only 3,800 leading off, same position. So yeah, I just think they're going to be too popular. And as a result of that, I'm willing to embrace the risk with a team like Texas or Pittsburgh or even the White Sox potentially, but probably not.
Let's talk about Texas against Walker Buehler. So would you put Texas against Walker Buehler as a B tier team?
B, C.
Or Taylor's the type of thing where they're truly a C tier team, and the Cardinals should be a D tier team.
Yeah, since they're not going to be as popular because Buehler still has the name value, I would put Texas ahead of them. Seager being in there would make me feel a lot better about it. There's a chance he won't be. He's been out for quite a while. But if he is, the stack looks a lot better. There are still some cheap guys in there, though. Obviously, Semien, Seager, Garcia are pricey, but you're also getting these kind of punt outfielders that make their lineup on a daily basis. Buehler really hasn't been good.
Like Ezekiel Duran or something like that. He's always quarter infielder.
Yeah. Buehler's had control issues. The strikeouts aren't there as much as they have been. Ballpark's good for power. And if they're going to be significantly lower owned than a team like the Cardinals, I'm happy to get to them instead.
Okay, so are you down with the Rangers at C and Cardinals at RotoGrinders.D, or do you want to move it up like that? I mean, my natural inclination based on, like, I don't put the Rangers even at, like, low ownership. Like, I'd still almost rather play the Diamondbacks.
Yeah,
I'd
I
almost
think
rather play
the
Bucky.
mm-hmm.
Like, I prefer
sparingly for Cardinals. Yeah, looks good to me.
How about the Angels against Slade Ciccone? Because they're in a similar projection, similar. I mean, Cicone's an even worse pitcher. I mean, they're at least a C tier team, but if you think they're significantly better than playing the Rangers, maybe they're even a B tier. Maybe that's the cheap team that you play with the Yankees stack.
Yeah, I think they're B also. I don't like it, but Ciccone is not good at all. They're cheap as well, except for like Rengifo and Ward are kind of somewhat pricey, but certainly not overwhelmingly. Decent power here. They're better against lefties, admittedly, but it's cheap. It's a fine park. Ciccone is attackable. Yeah, just a team I'd rather get to than the Cardinals if they're not going to be as popular.
How about the Seattle Mariners against Jonathan Cannon? I'd rank the Mariners higher if Cannon, if we didn't have Peterson on the slate or whatever, and people were going to be like streaming pitchers against the Mariners, I'd put him higher, but I don't know. I think I'd rather play the Rangers over the Mariners. And maybe I'll put him, I mean, they're not an F tier team because, I mean, Jonathan Cannon is no one that you should be avoiding. I think I'm more likely for the Mariners to play one-offs from them than a 5-man stack. But if you're playing if you want to play the Mariners and then play a Miller Peterson lineup, I think that's more of a large field play.
Right.
But like in my 3 lineups, like I'm not going to have any Mariners in my lineups.
No, it's not a super cheap stack. It's not historically a good ballpark for offense either. You're not getting the leverage, which puts the Marlins ahead of them, sadly, I think, just because of that.
Are we going to do that right now? Should I put the Marlins are not the Marlins project like really low against Peterson. Yeah. Like they're automatically not an F tier team because they may be facing a pitcher that's going to be 30% owned on the slate. But I still put it like, you may say you'd rather play the Marlins than the Mariners, but it's not like at that point, maybe I'm playing Cardinals before I play the Mariners also. Like I'm not playing Mariners on the slate. It's just that if you chose to play them, you're not crazy. Like anyone in the F tier, very similar to our buckets. Like if a pitcher is in a bucket, you're not nuts for playing them. If they're not in a bucket, I don't know what you're doing, right? Then you're nuts. The F tier is kind of that like nuts tier of like, on this slate, why are you playing this team? And just because Peterson is owned, you tell me Peterson is 10% owned, the Marlins just go right there, right in the F tier.
Yeah. There probably isn't a single F tier team on the slate then, because the Marlins and the White Sox are facing the most popular pitchers on the board as the worst offenses. So the White Sox probably belong on the D tier also, just for the ownership of the opposing pitcher angle. And they're both cheap.
I disagree with you. I would put the F tier. I would put the White Sox in the F tier, and I would definitely put the Pirates in the F tier. This is the reason, because we're talking about stacks. I make this case all the time. Can you play one-offs from any team? Yeah, sure. Yeah, a home run could from anyone. The issue on this slate, Taylor, is yes, you get leverage from playing. Like if Bryce Miller was 50% owned, you get leverage. So like, if you want, maybe the White Sox I'll put there, but the Pirates, like Sonny Gray, maybe like 30% owned. But what is the chances that the Pirates on an 8-game slate with 16 teams not only hit Sonny Gray, but hit him hard enough, right, for Sonny Gray to fail and the Pirates being the top stack of the entire night? Because a lot of people, they end up doing this like blindly. They go, well, Sonny Gray's going to be owned. I'm going to play the Pirates. Sonny Gray gives up 4 earned runs, 5 strikeouts. He walks 2. He pitches for 5 innings. He gives up 7 hits. And you look at his fantasy, it's like he has like 7 fantasy points, 6 fantasy. It's like, oh, he failed. And then you look at the Pirate stack and you're like, oh, it failed also. Like they scored 4 runs. No one hit a home run or anything. And like what are the chances that Sonny Gray is going to, that I wouldn't play 5 Pirates.
I think like a 3-man is a lot more viable. If you're playing 3 Pirates and 5 Yankees, that's something you can do.
But remember, the tier list is
also.
for a 5-man stack, and it's hard for me to make.
Yeah.
See, Miller is owned enough. So, like, if you tell me there's a 50% on pitcher, I'll take the shot on that he gets blown up for 5 guys blows him up, and then same for the Marlins. Like, you could even make the case that the Marlins could even be an F tier team just from a stack perspective. But I also think Peterson may be over, like Miller. If you're a stack facing Miller and Peterson, I just don't think Gray just doesn't make the cut for me. And I think Gray is a way better pitcher than Bryce Miller and David Peterson.
He is. Miller in particular is like a homer prone fly ball guy, so you can see where it can go wrong for him. Gray's not really that at all. And the Pirates obviously aren't a very powerful offense in the first place. So if we're talking about 5-man, yeah, you can make a case all 3 of those teams belong F tier. I don't think you need to stack 5 of any of them necessarily. But I would get to Miami and Chicago before I got to Pittsburgh full stack wise.
Okay, we got a couple of teams left. How about Christopher Sanchez will be decently owned? How about the Red Sox against him? I mean, they're playing in Fenway also, right?
Yeah, it's viable. Maybe a C tier team, just because Sanchez will probably be third or fourth, probably fourth among pitchers in terms of ownership, I would say, around there. So that alone makes them worth targeting, but they do have quite a few lefties in there against the lefty. It's not a good offense. Yeah, but they are better than Chicago, Miami, and Pittsburgh. So C tier, that's where they go.
So would you rather play the Red Sox against Sanchez or the Guardians against Lodolo?
I would much rather play the Guardians. So I'd probably put them in the B tier on the slate.
Are they a B tier team, or is that the Red Sox are a D tier team, so the Guardians could be a C tier team?
That is also viable. I could see why you want to pick Lodolo. Obviously, the Guardians aren't the most appealing offense. They have been a little bit better this season for power, and it is the best hitters park on the slate, I think. Guys like Fry and Naylor and Ramirez have hit lefties well. Even Freeman hitting toward the top of the lineup is fine. In terms of value, it makes sense. Like, Fry is wildly expensive, but I think his ownership is going to be low as a result. I don't think really anyone's going to be getting to this team, but they don't project poorly at all, which is why I was considering them in the B tier. But you probably
you made the case. You convinced me, Taylor. I don't think many people are going to play the Guardians at all. You don't get any leverage because Lodolo isn't going to be owned. But I think because people see Nick Lodolo, and the same thing for like Pivetta against the Phillies, it's like people are not going to play bats against them. But the difference is that I probably don't want to play a stack against Pivetta. But the way that the Guardians typically hit, like when they put up 12 runs, it's because like everyone on the team is like hitting around. And I mean, it's not from like 4 home runs. It's from like double, especially in Cincinnati. It could be double, single, right? Triple. I mean, like a lot of that stuff. So maybe I'm not sure if I get to the Guardians in my 3 lineups, but you're convincing me maybe to play one out of my 3 being maybe a 3-man Guardians. Maybe consider them a lot more, because I think if you run lineups, like how owned is like Jose Ramirez going to be today? Like not at all. I mean, like
they also they have a lot of speed. They steal a lot of bases. Lodolo is a guy you can run on, according to the numbers that I see on baseballsavant.com. So multiple ways for them to get there, not just the home runs, like you said. So I think they are pretty intriguing.
Okay, we got how many teams left? We got 2 teams left? 1 team left? Oh yeah, we had 2. Okay. We got on the other side in Cincinnati against Bybee, the Reds. They don't project well and they're expensive. But the ballpark, they do have upside. I can't put them in the F tier, but like if I'm going to spend up on a team, it's not going to be the Reds.
No, I would just rather play Bybee, even with the ownership being the way it is. I don't think it's a good lineup. Like you said, it's expensive for some reason. Ballpark's good, but I don't know. I don't really see the point in getting to them today. I think
I
you can
mean,
get
obviously you
leverage
could play two
other
guys in the
ways.
Reds lineup, but I mean, to pay $5K for Steer and $6K for Dela Cruz and $4K for these other guys, like, dude, they have a lower total than the Cardinals, and the Cardinals are like way cheaper, and the Angels
Right.
are like way cheap. I mean, like I don't mind like one off. Like if you want to play, like, dude, you can play Ellie Dela Cruz as a one off, like on any slate. But I mean, I'd rather play Bobby Witt as a one off at the similar price. So
Right.
like you're playing Ellie Dela Cruz as a one off just purely because of owner. Just like the Reds are much more of an ownership play than anything else. And we've already talked about teams that aren't going to be like, dude, I'll play the Guardians, right? I'll play the Diamondbacks will be under-owned today. So like, why am I paying up? Why am I playing Peterson plus Garrett in order to get the Reds?
Right.
Right.
There's no need. I think D is appropriate for them.
Would you say the same thing about the Mets? Or would the Mets at least make the C tier against Braxton Garrett?
I'm curious about Garrett's ownership. I don't think he's going to be owned enough for them to be C tier. I think they are getting Francisco Alvarez back, which makes them a little bit better on paper. But I don't know. I think D is appropriate unless Braxton's going to be a lot more owned than we think he is.
Right. The problem with the Mets is that the players that you want to play, it's just like kind of like you're playing Lindor at 4,600. You're playing Alonso at 5,100. You're playing Nimmo, JD Martinez. I mean, like their total is barely over 4. Like it's barely over 4. And they're playing in Citi Field.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, can you play any of these guys as one? Can you play Francisco Alvarez as a one-off? Can you play Mark Vientos as a one-off? Starling, like I feel like this is like one-off, 2-man, 3. Like if you're playing Yankees plus Mets or Royals plus Mets or something like that,
Exactly.
I think it's doable. But once you start piecing all these guys together and you want to play 5 guys, you're like, oh, why aren't I just playing the Guardians? Why aren't I just playing? Like, it's just that there's no one that's like cheap that's worth playing, and there's nothing that's like absurdly expensive, as opposed to some other teams where, like, if you're playing the Guardians, like, feel free to just throw in Austin Hedges at 2,500 in your catcher spot and play 4 good Guardians, and you're fine. You're good. And because you're playing the stack, it's no problem playing that one cheap piece to get everything that you wanted.
Yeah, the Mets, just kind of like the Reds, like it's not a cheap enough stack to get to. Garrett is probably going to be a secondary, like he might come in around 10% owned, 10 to 15%, something like that. I don't really think that's enough to make them a 5-man consideration on this slate. I do think they're fine for one-offs, like you said, or like a 2-man, but it's probably as far as I would go.
Okay, last question before we get out of here. We got all the stacks in our tiers. Yankees being the highest owned stack on the slate. Which would you I don't know, I don't want to give you a choice or anything. One of the concepts in DFS is that obviously the heavy correlation exists in baseball, which means if Aaron Judge does well, it's more likely that Juan Soto does well, and more likely that Stanton does well. Would you rather play a chalk pitching combination of Miller and Peterson? Or would you, or it could possibly that you don't consider, do you want to play a 20% on Aaron Judge as a one-off? Do you want to play a 15, 20% Stanton as a one? Like, are the Yankees owned enough where you're either stacking or avoid where, and I'm not even talking about 150 lineups. I'm talking about like if you're playing, single entry 3 max, where the condensed ownership actually gets even higher, right? Should your strategy from a heuristic standpoint go in and go, either I'm deciding to play the Yankees, and when I play them, I'm going to play at least 3, right? Or I'm going to play 0 and just like either I play them as either a secondary stack, a main stack, or not at all, but not to play like Anthony Volpe at shortstop as a one-off.
I think someone like Judge, like it's always okay, even if he's going to be wildly owned because the upside is so ridiculous in a single entry, especially. I think it's fine, but I'm generally inclined to play the stack or nothing with a team like this that is probably going to be super popular on a not short, but like a medium-sized slate, very obvious spot. I think I would rather eat that pitching combination and get different with bats instead of stacking the Yankees with a different pitching combination, just because generally pitching projections are more reliable, generally, not always. But yeah, I just think there are more ways to go if you play the chalk pitchers with different bats as opposed to the chalk bats with different pitchers. So it's not comfortable
right now,
fading a team
if
like
I had to
that.
choose a
But
combination, if I had to choose a combination now, I think it may be Royals plus Angels. Like to not play the cheap Cardinals, you play the Angels, and to not play the more owned Yankees, you play the Royals.
right. I think the Royals being A tier and they're not going to be owned accordingly. If I'm stacking a team that's not the Yankees, they'd be my first stop on this slate. And then if you have the money to play the Dodgers, then by all means play the Dodgers. But value-wise, I think it's just easier to get to Kansas City. And I don't think the ownership, like they'll be more popular than the Dodgers, but I don't think the gap's wide enough to where it's something I'm worried about.
Well, okay. Well, you'll get more into it once we get starting lineups get announced later today. Weather, right? We haven't mentioned the fact that this the Phillies Red Sox game. There's rain in the forecast, but it has it at yellow right now, so it may be perfectly fine. But you'll have to see later by checking out Crunch Time, right? You'll be on 6:20 with Roth.
Yep, 6:20.
It's a long day for you. But is that by your bedtime? Is that you do Crunch Time at 6 and then you go to sleep early?
Not usually. It's only 3:20 for me, of course, so it's not too bad. I'm usually not a full corpse by then, but shortly thereafter, I might be heading to bed.
Well, check that out later tonight. Hit that thumbs up button on your way out the door. You know how much I like the thummy thumbs. Yeah, give me those thummy thumbs. Hit the subscribe button if you're new here. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. Like I said, Grinders Live later today with Crunch Time. Get all the details, all the breakdowns of all the games tonight. We got Crunch Time also at 12:30, about a half an hour from now, for this 4-game early slate. We got the Swolecast on the Swolecast channel. You can check that out at 1 o'clock. They'll be live. Probably drafting best ball, talking about stuff that doesn't matter to me, at least, for another 2.5 months. But feel free to check that out, and always sign up for a Discord. That's free. RotoGrinders.com/Discord, and I'll be back tomorrow. I'm not sure if there's a Grinders Live tomorrow or this show. I'll be here nonetheless. You'll see a thumbnail. You'll see my face. I'll be here regardless of what show it is, because I'm always here for you at 11 o'clock Eastern, talking about all things you're thinking about in daily fantasy props and pick'em on RotoGrinders Today.